living through the rumors after the breakup of her duo, The Civil Wars, and about how the band's demise almost ended her marriage.
We realized we could fake it. We didn't want to do that. And so we didn't make any grand declarations that we would stay together.
Hear it and subscribe at deathsexmoney.org.
Of the 23 or so leading presidential candidates for the 2016 election, 11 are current or former governors, and all of them tout their economic successes in their home states, with several of them claiming credit for outstanding economic performance. But how well are their states really doing, and how much credit does a governor deserve? Bloomberg News reporter Mark Niket has compared their states to rate gubernatorial effectiveness. His article, Governors Who Would Be President Have Mixed Records on Miracles, is available at Bloomberg.com, and we have a link to it on our show page at WMIC.org. I'm pleased to welcome Mark Niket to our show today. Hello.
Hi, Leonard.
There are now 11 former governors running. Did former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore join the race after you had prepared your article?
Yes, we had set this up while there were 10 announced, and he announced after we published.
Have you had a chance to see how he or the state of Virginia would compare?
No, actually, I haven't looked at his records. We did all the data crunching for the 10 who ran, and I haven't looked at Gilmore yet.
Now, 5 of the 10 candidates in tonight's GOP debate were or are governors: Bush, Walker, Huckabee, Christie, and Kasich. The national economy is improving. How are their states doing financially and physically?
Well, the states are all improving. I mean, they're coming out of the worst recession since the Great Depression, so the numbers have all improved since a lot of these governors took office. What we tried to do in our analysis was really do a deep dive on 11 key economic indicators just to see, how well they did stacked up against their peers. I mean, one of the problems with the analysis and the situation we have is these governors who are running for president served at different times, so you can't compare them directly in a lot of cases. And they served at different, economic times in terms of how well the economy was doing. But we thought it was fair to look at how each governor stacked up against his peers. So if you look at each economic indicator, we can do a ranking of all the states and show how the governor's state fared against all others during his time period.
Also, some states have great natural resources like fossil fuels, although they have fallen in price. Others have boom industries like high tech. How much does the economic picture vary from state to state, regardless of who's in the state house?
It does vary, and the conditions determine a lot of what happens with the state economy. As you said at the top, there's an age-old debate about how much credit or blame does a governor deserve for, what in a lot of cases are factors he can't control. There's national and international economic forces that drive the economy, affects all states. But one of the things we sort of pointed out in our study is that, some states have distinct advantages, either with, like you said, natural resources. Texas, for example, has a long history of boom and bust cycles when it comes to the oil and natural gas industry. And whoever's governor at the time of a boom cycle certainly benefits from that. And we see that with Rick Perry, who certainly served during a boom time for the Texas economy. So his numbers all look very good. Now, certainly he deserves credit for what he did in office in terms of what a governor can control by way of a tax policy or regulatory policy. And the history in Texas is largely that, where a governor sort of keeps a low tax, low regulatory burden, and let the economic forces, in this case related to the oil and gas industry, do their work.
But he isn't polling well enough to make the cut for the debate. Neither is George Pataki, who comes from a major economic powerhouse. So do the polls indicate how much importance voters say they attach to economic issues like that?
It's hard to parse out exactly how much, weight economic factors versus any other things that the voters might care about, factor into a poll. But clearly, one of the things these governors are trying to do is say, hey, look, I was able to manage the economy well in my state. I can do it for the country. And we see that they do have good records for certain indicators, but other indicators, they're not so strong. And I think it's important to sort of look at the whole picture of, where does a state rank against its peers across a broad spectrum of economic indicators.
Of the 11 economic factors you examined, Are some, like state GDP or unemployment, more important than others?
Well, if you talk to economists, they'll say that the number one sort of indicator of an economic health is job creation, because that drives a lot of other things that are happening in the economy. If you have healthy job creation, spending is probably going to be good. Your GDP is going to be higher. So we start with job creation, but a lot of these factors play a role in the big picture of economic health. GDP is important. Population growth is a strong indicator. Other indicators we looked at as part of our study were income. And what we did was sort of look at the change over time, from when the governor took office to when the governor left. What was the change, usually in percent change or percentage point change, and how did that change rank among all 50 states? So, besides those indicators, we also looked at unemployment rate change, the rate of poverty change, and indicators like the amount of state debt per capita over time.
But you treated jobs and unemployment separately.
But we treated it together. I mean, we just looked at all 11 indicators and presented them in a nice graphic. If you go to our story, you'll be able to see the graphic, and you could sort of link and click on each header or each candidate and then see how the various rankings stack up. And we didn't give anyone more weight than the other. We just wanted to present all 11. I highlighted jobs just because economists always sort of start there. Okay, if you're going to look at, there's a number of different indicators you could use to sort of measure economic health, but invariably it starts with what's the job picture look like in your state.
Income inequality has gotten a lot of press in the past 2 years. Did you consider including inequality?
Not as a specific indicator. There's different ways you can try and measure income inequality. With the available data we have over time, we decided to look at income, specifically per capita personal income, because the Bureau of Economic Analysis gives you some good numbers over time where you can measure, again, the change in per capita personal income from when the governor took office to when the governor left, and see how that change stacks up against all 50 states.
Over the past 40 years, 4 of the 6 presidents had been governors. Do governors have an advantage over members of Congress or outsiders like Donald Trump and Ben Carson when it comes to winning presidential nominations?
Well, governors will tell you that they do. They will make the case that they are chief executives, that unlike legislators who create laws, they're actually in charge of running something, in this case states, and that experience translates to running a country. I was just at a National Governors Association meeting in West Virginia, and if you talk to the governors there, and I did, to a person, a governor, they will say the experience that a governor has solving problems and dealing with issues that confront them at the state level aren't all unlike about the problems they might face at the national level, just writ large. So they'll say, yes, if you're a governor, you already show that you have the leadership skills and the ability to solve problems and lead the country because you've led your state. Now, the legislators will say, well, that's all fine and good, but we also have foreign policy experience, and we have other skill sets that are important when it comes to running a country. But governors definitely do try to make the case that their experience gives them a leg up against their competition.
Although running California might be like running a country, while Rhode Island would have fewer problems.
Right, and certainly the size of the state would make a difference there, and some of the problems that you would have to deal with at that scale sort of at least rival or bring it closer to what you would face as a president on a national scale.
Has the primary system changed the equation from when political leaders chose a candidate in smoke-filled rooms?
Well, it seems it has, and maybe the biggest reason for that is what's happened with our campaign finance situation. Since Citizens United, we've seen the rise of the super PAC and the ability of these candidates to sort of find a wealthy billionaire who's able to support a campaign, maybe in a way that in the past it couldn't have been supported. So it allows the candidate to stay in the race longer and perhaps catch fire and improve going forward. But I think it also encourages more candidates to run because they know that they can find outside sources of funding that can help keep them in the game, so to speak, and lightning might strike and they can move forward. Even if they might not think going in they have the best chance, or maybe otherwise would not have run. In fact, it's a record number of governors running this cycle. I checked with the Eagleton Institute at Rutgers, and as far as they can tell, this is the most number of governors we've had sitting in former since 1912, and that was half the number we have running today.
Now, which governors have boasted most loudly about their state's economic performances? Rick Perry, John Kasich, and Bobby Jindal have all talked about economic miracles in their states. What does the word miracle mean in this context?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's not the candidate themselves who uses the word miracle, but their supporters use it. In some cases, the candidates use it a miracle. John Kasich in Ohio, for example, has talked about the Ohio miracle, and what he's talking about there is, again, sort of taking over a state that was really at the bottom after, in some cases, in the middle of the recession. Ohio, where I'm based, had lost 350,000 jobs. The state budget was in a position where it was looking at an $8 billion shortfall potentially, and this is sort of the economic environment that Governor Kasich inherited when he took office in 2011. And the miracle he talks about is being able to balance that budget, with the shortfall without raising taxes, and pursue job creation that sort of turned around, what had been a pretty bleak economic picture in the state, and one that he could boast about.
Now, the United States economy is growing. Are any of the GOP governors crediting President Obama for an American miracle?
Well, some of those things where, again, you could debate about how much credit or blame a governor should get, but when the times are good, the president gets none of that credit. If the times are bad, well, that's headwinds from Washington and the problems with the national economy that are keeping them from moving forward. Or we'll make the case that we would be doing much better if it were not for the policies in Washington, sort of a negative you can't prove. And what's interesting about that is, these governors in some cases will try and tout those records when, like we were talking about before, there are other factors at play that clearly, had an impact, beyond whatever they could control. A good example of that is Jeb Bush in Florida. He served during a time of a good economy, and at the time there was a big housing bubble, and Florida, because of some of the factors in Florida, did very well with the housing bubble. We asked Zillow to look at how much of the economic growth in Florida, which is look at Bush's numbers across the board, housing prices, and the economic growth in Florida during that time could be attributed to the housing bubble. And once Governor Bush left office and the housing bubble burst, you could see the impact of Nevada, because the Bush office, only Nevada lost about 1% of the jobs due to what happened in the housing market, or had a large factor, reason for that.
Has he been asked about that?
Yes, and he'll say, well, sure, there's other factors at play, but, look at the results. And that's sort of what always comes down to the governors. They'll try and point to the results of what happened while they're in office. In the case of Jeb, it's very good.
Florida is one of the worst performers nationwide in terms of jobs in your survey.
Well, again, we didn't look at the current time. We looked at Florida under the tenure of Jeb Bush and how that compared with the other governors. Because, again, that's what we wanted to get at is, during the time these governors were at the helm, so to speak, what was the economic performance of their states?
Well, for example, Bobby Jindal, he has benefited from the post-Katrina rebuilding, but that's not because of state policy, and I imagine much of the money that has gone into rebuilding Louisiana came from